Hello, my name is Elizabeth Phillips. I am a new student at Henderson. This is actually my second semester here. I'm kind of getting the hang of things. Today, I want to talk about inclusive classrooms. This is our discussion question for the week, and I kind of picked out my two questions based on students with special needs and then least restrictive environments and inclusion itself. So the first question that I chose was, what is your current understanding of the least restrictive environment? And prior to actually coming to Henderson and taking classes here, I actually hadn't heard too much about it, to be honest. From my initial thought of the least restrictive environment was an environment where students could work freely, do their assignments freely, learn freely, really without being restricted by certain rules or certain procedures, just based off of what the teacher puts out. So just a classroom, kind of like a GT classroom, where students get to kind of go around and they get to learn in their own way. And upon reading the first chapter of my textbook, I actually realized that the least restrictive environment is a term that's interpreted to mean that, and this is a quote from page 7 of the textbook, individuals with disabilities are to be educated in environments as close as possible to the general education classroom setting, a concept, not a place. And I found this really interesting. I honestly had never considered that it was focused around individuals with disabilities. I always just kind of assumed that it was for individuals in general. So I found this very, very interesting. So upon kind of looking at the least restrictive environment, I got a little bit into what exactly a least restrictive environment was and what inclusive education was in the classroom, because I've heard a little bit before, but really not too much. I figured out inclusive education has less to do with addressing how an individual's disabilities impact their learning. It actually has more to do with the consideration of barriers that present themselves in the classroom. So certain barriers that prevent an individual, a special needs individual, from learning effectively and being able to grasp the content that's being taught. Just those things in general, that's really focused mainly on, well, not mainly, but it's focused, a good portion of it is focused on that. I found that oftentimes inclusive education, it either impedes or it excludes meaningful and effective participation in the classroom. And it makes it very difficult for students to understand what's going on and to learn. An underlying assumption, and this is something in the textbook as well, I believe it is on page 9. It says an underlying assumption that correlates with this belief is that all students are part of a general education classroom. However, it is very, very important to keep in mind that physical placement is a means to an end. So for example, inclusion refers to a condition or state of being. As far as inclusive classrooms go, what this textbook is telling me, or what I have interpreted it into, is just that inclusive classrooms are based off of general education classrooms, are very similar, but they're not the real deal. It's just a state of being. It's helping special needs students feel a sense of belonging, feeling like they're in that same general education classroom as everybody else, and it normalizes it, if that makes sense. Inclusion pretty much normalizes the special needs classroom into a general education classroom where everything's pretty much about the same. And I thought that was pretty interesting and cool. Inclusion simply implies to a sense of belonging or acceptance, more often than not within the general education classroom. And this is because it has more to do with how educators respond to differences within the classroom. So for example, in order to have successful inclusion within your classroom, fresh thinking about where and how students with special needs should be educated is very required. It's a very strong point in order to help impact your students more. You want them to be able to learn the most without raising barriers that are going to keep them from reaching that goal. So the second question that I had chosen was, did you ever notice if the teacher planned different activities for different children when you were in school? Like maybe they were reading or math groups. There were math groups going on, or there was something going on. As far as I go, I went to three different schools. I went to Mountain Pine High School, Jessieville High School, and Lake Hamilton. Um, Lake Hamilton, I really didn't notice too much different, honestly, but at Jessieville and Mountain Pine, I did notice that they would have separate groups for separate students depending on where they were with their coursework, what they had going on, if they had any difficulties that or disabilities that kept them from really learning certain things or that made it harder for them to learn certain things. And more often than not, especially at Jessieville School District, I'd find my teachers pulling those students off to the side, putting them in a special group of their own, and then setting everyone else into their own little peer groups. And the teacher would work with that group the whole entire time, which I thought was very interesting, very neat. And then every so often, what she would do is she would get some of the regular students and pair them up with a special needs student, like one or two special needs students. And she'd have us all work together and kind of help them and teach them and help get things down, which I thought was, well, I thought it was cool. It was something that helped me learn as a student. It helped me get everything down in my head. I was proud that I got to help teach my peers. The fact that they were special needs really didn't bother me. It didn't concern me. I honestly enjoyed it. Now, a concern that I have with least restrictive environments and inclusive classrooms is that special needs students may not be getting or learning the content very quickly or very well just because of certain barriers presented into the classroom. So let's say you had a bunch of special needs students in a general education classroom, you can't guarantee that some of them are going to learn things as fast as some of your general education students. And I'm not trying to set a stereotype, because I do know there are special needs students that are amazing at certain things. Absolutely amazing, brilliant, smart, and I love them. And I've had a few friends like that, but there are other students who struggle, like in a math class, there are students who struggle with numbers that are going to need more help than the other students. And sometimes the teacher can't quite get to them because they're busy trying to go through everyone else. And then eventually they just don't learn anything or get any of the content. Now, something that I do enjoy about inclusive classrooms and about a least restrictive environment is the fact that you get to help your peers. I was in a general education classroom all throughout high school, and I got to help my peers all the time. I enjoyed it. Plus, my special needs peers, oftentimes they'd help me. They'd teach me a lot of stuff that I never even knew.